What's up? Welcome into the latest episode of Pod Like a Champion, the blueandgold.com recruiting podcast. It's Tuesday, December 8th, 2020. I'm Patrick Engel, joined as always by our recruiting insider, Mike Singer. It is 17 days from Christmas, but more importantly, 8 days from commitmess, right?
Yeah.
It's recruiting season, Mike. I know you're already working on it.
Yeah, dude, it's weird. Like this is home visit season. This is we should have just had the last official visit weekend this past week. It's just before National Signing Day. It just feels weird, right, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, like the lead up into signing day, and maybe this went away a little bit when they put it into two periods. But even then, in the early signing period, is always like all this craziness of, all right, this staff is going to go in home with this one kid to try to flip them or tell them not to sign early. And you have all this kind of zaniness leading up to it. And now it's just like, oh, yeah, you kind of forget that these guys are signing next week. And especially in like Notre Dame's case, I don't know. I mean, so much of this class has been locked in for so long since what, like June and July and all that, and even a good bit of it. What 10 guys were committed pre coronavirus, so you almost forget. And it's like, oh yeah, I feel like those guys have already signed. Like, I mean, like a Gabriel Rubio and a Tyler Buckner and Blake Fisher and some of them. Like you think, all right, they're not going anywhere, and they're all coming in early. So it's like, yeah, you kind of forget that there's something left with that part of the recruitment
Well,
other than like the two or three spots that are left for Notre Dame to fill in this class.
it's funny you mentioned that, Patrick, because the segment we're going to end on today is kind of the reason I wrote this into our outline was basically like, let's remind some people about a couple of recruits, because I feel like we're kind of forgetting about dudes who've been committed so long. So it's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, like who remember? It's almost funny. Like you just forget that. Oh yeah, Justin Walters is in this class, or Kane Barong is in this class, just because it's like, oh yeah, that was like a year ago when they, at least in Barong's case, committed, or Walters. I think he got the offer sometime around
Yep,
then.
last September.
But yeah, getting down into the nitty gritty of recruiting season, or at least as much as you can in this dead period, do it all virtually recruiting, whatnot. But still, a lot of stuff left to play out here for Notre Dame as signing day comes up next week. Make sure you're following along with us at blueandgold.com, subscribing to blueandgold.com to read Mike's work in that lead up to signing day. You can follow Mike on Twitter at rivals_singer for all of those developments as signing day nears. You can follow me at Patrick_Engel. More for the team side stuff and just whatever other nonsense you want to put up with on my feed. If you're listening on podcasts, please leave us a 5-star review and nice comments if you like what you hear. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to our YouTube channel for a lot more content. So, Mike, 8 days out until signing day, 23 guys in the class, which a year ago or even 6 months ago seemed like that's your drop dead
Far-fetched. Yeah.
high number, right?
Yeah.
And now we're sitting here thinking this might get to 25, which I mean, I guess makes sense when you consider everyone who's still out there as far as like, yeah, those are guys you just make room for. But two, just still kind of looking at one stuff that happens in the course of the season with guys leaving and positions you want to shore up more than you thought you'd have to in the summer or after last season. But Mike, just kind of take us through what's left for Notre Dame in this 2021 class as far as getting to that 25, which looks increasingly likely.
Yeah, a couple things on scholarship totals I want to hit on because yeah, 6, 7 months ago I was like 20, maybe 21. That's as big as it's gonna get. So, here we're at 23 commits on paper for Notre Dame, and the number even could get to 26. And some people, well, 25, you can't take more than 25. Well, there's just if that's how you feel, just don't, because that's not how it works anymore. I mean, you have schools taking 30 kids in a class. So I'm not going to get into that. So we'll put that aside. Maybe discuss that for another day. But yeah, I think part of it is why Notre Dame's taking a bigger class is you've had some guys that have left the program, unexpected, expected. For the Notre Dame stuff, I don't know, but I would have to say that a couple of them have to be players that that the staff think didn't foresee transferring coming into the season. Also, I think the Irish are cashing in on their success from this season. I think potentially a fourth defensive lineman in this class is maybe a bit of a luxury. Also, maybe you've had Franklin and what is it, Kofi Wardlow transfer. So a little bit of both on some of these areas as well. And another thing to note, I think this is early speculation on my part, but I think the 2022 classes across the board are going to be pretty small. Not only for Notre Dame but everybody, as these schools are trying to get down to 85 again, because Brian Kelly said in a press conference that 2021 is basically you can have as many players as you want on scholarship, but you have to get back down to 85 for the 2022 football season. So I think 2021, let's have those numbers come up, and then 2022, the classes will be a little bit smaller. And I think another thing to mention as well, there's a lot of moving parts here, is the potential one-time transfer rule. So if that gets passed, I think you're going to have some guys leave the football program at Notre Dame. Speculation on my part on guys transferring and the one-time transfer rule. I have heard some people think that's going to happen. So that's kind of the numbers outlook on why it's bigger, at least from my vantage point. In terms of what's left, Patrick, yeah, there's a few guys left in the class to talk about. I think the biggest one right now is Donovan Edwards that we've got to start with. Ranked as the number 74 overall player in the country, number 3 running back, number 3 player in Michigan. The main schools to talk about right now are Georgia, Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, and Oklahoma. Now, Penn State and Oklahoma, don't feel too. I don't think there's too much to write home about those two schools, but so I'm more looking at Notre Dame, Michigan, and Georgia, and there seems to be some optimism from all three schools in that recruitment. Georgia is certainly interesting down there in the SEC. I don't believe he's been there, so that would be tough for me to see him going there, but still there's some momentum for the Bulldogs in that recruitment. Michigan's been long considered the favorite, heavy favorite in the Rivals Futurecast, but those have slowed down because Michigan has struggled this season, and you've had rumors that Jim Harbaugh might be on the way out, but those are starting to cease now, and there's been rumors of contract extension for Jim Harbaugh, but you might have some assistant coaching changes. Would there be running back coach change? So offensive coordinator change. So there's a lot of kind of uncertainty there with Edwards in Michigan. I know the Wolverines staff is on him really hard right now, and I still think 8 days out you would peg Michigan as the favorite. But Notre Dame is certainly in the mix. They're having the opposite season of Michigan. They're undefeated heading into the ACC championship game. Patrick, as we talked about on our Monday Night Live show, unless they get blown out against Clemson, we feel that they've pretty much already locked in a spot in the college football playoff. So things are very much trending towards Notre Dame in terms of just momentum. Like, Michigan's been sliding on the field, Notre Dame's been doing so well, and without visits, these kids, what they have to go on is on the field success. They're not able to go see the coaches and see the facility. So what's new from over the summer or in the spring is on the field results and maybe postseason coaching changes. Well, Edwards has to make a decision here in the next 8 days, and he is signing early. So, he's got to go with the information that he has. So it's going to be a fascinating recruitment down the stretch with Donovan Edwards. And look, Notre Dame has Logan Diggs committed. He was on campus this past weekend, so I feel really good. As far as I know, off the top of my head, he was the only Notre Dame current verbal commit who had not been on campus yet. So that has changed. Now all 23 guys, as we record this on Tuesday afternoon, have been on campus. So that's great news. So Logan Diggs feel really good about him signing with Notre Dame. So there's one, but the Irish want to get to two. Donovan Edwards is the guy that the staff has been working on hard. They've had some Zoom calls with him. Lance Taylor was in constant communication with him last week. But look, they're kind of in limbo right now, waiting to see. The Notre Dame staff is waiting to see what Donovan Edwards wants to do. And look, if Donovan Edwards doesn't want in, then Audric Estime looks like the guy that the staff will target from there. And man, that's a heck of a consolation prize, because I do think if Notre Dame offers Audric Estime, they'll be able to flip him from Michigan State. He's listed at 5'11", 210 pounds. He really moved up. I want to say it was 83 spots in the Rivals national rankings just from this season. Now up to number 132 in the country, number 7 running back. His senior season at St. Joseph's was incredible. Really strong year. Big bell cow running back. I think he would pair very well with guys like Logan Diggs and Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree, because Estime is a bigger power back, but he also has got some wheels to him as well. So that's kind of the feeling, is that they're in on Donovan Edwards. But if they offer Estime, I feel like he will flip. So if you're on Twitter one day and you see that Notre Dame, offered Audric Estime, then that might be a really good indication of where Donovan Edwards is going or not going. So look, running back recruiting is very interesting to follow right now. That's kind of the blurb on it. If you want even more, go to blueandgold.com and check out the Gold Standard article that I posted on Monday morning. And then there's even another running back target that is mentioned in this article that we won't get into now. But yeah, Patrick, it's just a fascinating thing to watch because you're in on Donovan Edwards, but also Audric Estime's committed to another school. If Notre Dame offers in the next week, I think they get him. But if they don't, does he sign in December? Does he wait until February? I'm not sure what Notre Dame will do.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I know we touched on it, I believe, in the last time we recorded, about how do you play that thing out of, you don't want to miss out on your guy, but you also don't want to risk anything that could happen with someone like a Donovan Edwards.
Right.
And I think there's a little bit of like, hey, it's just kind of nice for Notre Dame to be in that spot, because Edwards put out a top 7 in, what was it, like October or something like that. And I read it on here toward the end of an episode. It's just like, all right, this is news, whatever. Like, he included Notre Dame in the top 7, and that's that. At least what we were thinking at the time. It's like, okay, cool. He's just being nice. That's that. It's a hat on a table, a logo and an edit, whatever. And since then, it's gone more and more of a thing you want to pay attention to. And I think even though that's kind of something we didn't expect, it's kind of what you would have forecasted and had said on here before, of if Notre Dame's going to win that or even be in like a final 2 of it's Notre Dame or someone else, it's going to outlast a lot of those other ones, and outlast a Oklahoma or Georgia in the dead period where you can't visit or hasn't visited or don't get the regular visit if you do because you can't meet the coaches and all that fun stuff. Or outlast maybe you didn't see this coming in over the summer, but outlast Michigan with instability there. If there's one thing recruits hate, it's instability.
Yeah.
Obviously, with everything going on there, it's like, all right, if you can outlast it because some of those other ones had negatives or things that ended up being deal breakers, and Notre Dame is just kind of the last man standing, that's where you have to be. And it's getting closer to that. We'll see if it actually goes over that edge, depending on what Michigan does. And of course, he's enrolling early. He's got to decide here in the next week. So you still kind of, again, hope to have been at this spot with Edwards if you wanted him, even back in June. All right, if you were here, you're feeling pretty good if you're Notre Dame, just because I'm not sure it was all that likely or all that clear they were going to be in the running for him if you went back 6 months ago.
I remember that top 7. I was in Northeast Tennessee seeing Prince Colley, and I see Donovan Edwards tweet out the top 7. I call up our recruiting staff writer, Mason Plummer. I'm like, hey, look, man, Donovan Edwards probably is not coming to Notre Dame, but the top 7's still news. Like, we need to write an article. Can you do this while I'm on the road? And yeah, I I didn't think I didn't think Notre Dame had much of a shot. I wasn't even sure if they were going to make the top 7. But what has happened this fall has been the perfect storm for Notre Dame. I mean, Edwards felt like a Michigan lock, but they've struggled so much. Notre Dame's been so good this season, especially how they're running the ball. Donovan Edwards very much pays attention to offensive line recruiting, and the Irish's O-line class is finished strong with Caleb Johnson flipping from Auburn. So, this recruitment is just playing how things are going on the field is playing into Notre Dame's favor. It's gone from a long shot to, yeah, the Irish have a puncher's chance in this one.
Yeah, and of course, like, adding on to the outlasting factor, doesn't hurt to go 10-0 and make
Yeah.
the ACC title game and beat Clemson. So yeah, we'll see if it's enough. It seems like some of the perceived instability of this Michigan make a head coaching change is starting to die out a little bit. But
Right.
either way, it's at least something to follow in this next week. And again, I didn't think it would be as we got to this point. If you had told me in June and asked me then, will it be worth following Donovan's recruitment from a Notre Dame perspective in December, I would have said no, but here it is.
Patrick,
So let's go to defense.
I'm sorry, Patrick. Before we move on, I got to go on a tangent. This is the Pod Lake Chain. This is what we do here. Do you remember the whole thing about Notre Dame put all their eggs in the Will Shipley basket? I had been saying that's not really true because they were still recruiting Donovan Edwards. They never stopped recruiting Donovan Edwards. When they offered Byron Cardwell, the other running back, spoiler alert, what was it, 3 or 4 weeks ago, Patrick, that's when it was like, okay, Notre Dame's taking a second running back in this class. But before that, it was either Donovan Edwards or one back. Like, so they've always been recruiting Donovan Edwards. When they were after Will Shipley, they were still recruiting Donovan Edwards. It was just different because the staff knew Will Shipley is deciding in the spring. Like, but they knew Donovan Edwards was playing the long game. So they were also playing the long game with Donovan Edwards. You don't, put out all of your energy in a 5K in the first 2 minutes. That is just not what you do. I don't run 5Ks, but I can. That's just my guess. So yeah, they played the marathon with Donovan Edwards because that's what his recruitment was forecasting. And with Will Shipley, they knew it was going to be a shorter recruitment. He was going to make a decision before the summer, and that's so. The whole put their eggs in one basket thing with Will Shipley is not true. They were always recruiting Donovan Edwards. It just looked a little bit different.
I don't know, Mike. I'm picturing you running a 5K, going full Michael Scott, loading up on the carbs and running the Meredith Palmer Memorial Celebrity Rabies Awareness Program. Fun race for the cure and spending all of the energy in the first 2 minutes.
I want Alfredo now. I want some maybe.
Okay, that actually sounds pretty solid. Shouts to Notre Dame's basketball folks for giving us some Alfredo in the pregame meal on Sunday night.
What?
Let's see what the encore is for tonight's game. Yeah.
Shouts
to you guys if you're listening to this.
What else? Garlic bread?
No, just the pasta.
Okay, I'll take it. Any protein in there?
Yeah. Nope.
All right. Well, now I'm a little disappointed, but still, that's pretty good for the Georgia Notre Dame game. Not to get off too much of a tangent, but that food was fantastic last year. That was the best press box food I ever had. Moving along.
Yeah, we could talk all day about good and bad press box food. I was disappointed that the post-game Papa John's at Notre Dame Stadium was only a one-time thing after Clemson. But you win some and you lose some. But okay, let's go on to defense here. But yeah, Mike, you're right. That Will Shipley narrative of all eggs in one basket looks just weirder and weirder as this thing plays out. And I mean, we've both made our feelings known on that. But yeah, it just is one of those things that the more you look at it, the more they're just not hurt by that perceived idea. But let's go on to defense here. A couple of names to know and just guys who are still the main targets here. With a couple of spots here on the defensive line, fourth defensive lineman, like you mentioned, and hey, maybe, just maybe, one more option in the secondary. What do we got to know there, Mike?
Yeah, Devin Upow, UCLA commit. At this point, it seems like it's either him or bust for fourth defensive lineman. This class, of course, they were after Kelvin Gilliam from Virginia, the Oklahoma commit, and he's decided to stick with the Sooners. So the Irish staff offered Upal the day before Thanksgiving, and um, just kind of waiting to see if any news drops here. That's kind of the situation right now. I am we can't put futurecast picks in for flips. I know another network can. We can't. If I could, I would have done that a week ago, but not able to. So just you're getting the info on the pod here. Is that yeah? I come next Wednesday, I anticipate Upal to sign with Notre Dame. He's also planning to enroll early at his school of choice, again, which I feel will be the Fighting Irish. I mentioned the 23 commits. All of them at this point have visited campus. Well, if Upal joins the class, he would be the one who hasn't. So he would be making the commitment to Notre Dame blind. But he's weighed out the pros and cons, and we will see what his ultimate decision is. But yeah, so looks like a commitment there. And then look, Notre Dame's got 5 defensive back commits in the class, but one guy is just too good to turn down. That's Sear Wright. Patrick, I was in doing some preparation for National Signing Day articles. I was reading some stuff that I've written throughout the year, and every time it come up about Sear Wright, I kept writing. Arguably the biggest defensive back target on the board for several months. Back when Ryan Barnes and Philip Riley and even like Terrion Arnold, all those guys were still on the board for Notre Dame. I always felt like Sear Wright was kind of the number one guy. As someone that Notre Dame offered back in August 2019, he visited for the Echoes Award Show weekend. And Notre Dame just always was in there. Never really felt like the Irish were the leader, but outlasted. That's kind of the theme for winter recruiting here for Notre Dame. It's just outlasting some of these other schools. Well, Michigan seems to be fading a little bit in Sear Wright's recruitment, and it might be USC or Notre Dame. The problem is it doesn't really matter if you finish second or 15th in a recruitment. There's no silver medal. You win it or you don't. And I do still feel like USC is the leader. My sources on the Notre Dame side of things feel a little bit more optimistic coming off of his visit, but that he's just a very hard kid to read, like Donovan Edwards, but different. Donovan Edwards is very to himself and very private. Sear Wright is quite literally a movie star. When Space Jam 2 hits, his Twitter followers are going to spike 15-fold. I mean, he's going to be a box office star playing Bronny James in Space Jam 2. So, Notre Dame has had actors before, but I just don't think, at the level of Sear Wright and in Los Angeles is a little bit more for Hollywood. So, or in terms of USC, close to Hollywood. So, I don't know. That's just kind of the feeling I have right now. If he commits to Notre Dame, wouldn't be a surprise. If he commits anywhere other than Notre Dame or USC, I would be surprised because I do feel like it's one of those two schools. But thing is, he's not signing next week. He is signing in February, making a decision January 2nd. I guess he could maybe silently sign with the school next week, but he's deciding, announcing January 2nd on national television, I believe on NBC. So maybe that's a good omen for Notre Dame that it's on NBC, or maybe it's just because it's in conjunction with the All-American Bowl, which unfortunately was canceled. So that's kind of the rundown for what's left in 2021. You're looking at another back. Whether it's Donovan Edwards or Roger Gaston next week, maybe it's neither, and the Irish look at options in January. But I do think Notre Dame will have an answer on who their second running back is, and we'll know next Wednesday at the latest, in my opinion. Then you're looking at another defensive lineman. I think that will be Devin Upal, and then potentially a 6th defensive back if Sear Wright wants to join. But we won't know that one next week.
Yeah, like you said, if you ain't first, you're last as far as recruiting goes. But at the same time, and we just talked about this with Donovan, like right now, Notre Dame is still trying to land him and land Sierra. And yeah, it won't matter where they finished if they don't land them, but they haven't committed anywhere yet. And as long as they are recruiting them, you have to just like the spot they're in relative to where we thought things would go for Notre Dame. I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 months ago with some of these guys. So I guess like I will say that yeah, no one there's not much to brag about if hey we finished second more than any other school for these top 100 kids or anything. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think you can still acknowledge that and also just still say like yes during this recruitment which is not over for either of them you have to like just what Notre Dame has done and just what has happened that needed to happen to a degree for them to be in the race as much as they are for, I guess, top two, top three, whatever you want to call Notre Dame's position with these two in this stage of their recruitments. So I guess it's kind of one of those things that both can be true. But still, Mike, like you said, both of them, if you had to put a favorite on them, it would not be Notre Dame. So I will take that and then ask you this. If you had to bet on it, you can't do this on DraftKings, but if you had to,
Thank
who
God.
does Notre Dame end up with on signing day next Wednesday?
Could you imagine if recruit bets that was actually a thing?
Oh God,
That would
no, I don't want to.
that would be so shady. Yeah. Eh, so Sear Wright, once he got to Notre Dame last Thursday, maybe I want to say he put this out on Thursday. Here's his top 12: Stanford, Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, Arizona State, Oklahoma, Colorado, Oregon, Penn State, Nebraska, Cal, and Texas. So here we are trying to figure out who Sierra Wright's, top couple schools are, less than a month out from his decision, and he's putting out a top 12. That's the first time he's publicly narrowed his list, so it's like, oh man, Sierra. But yeah, in terms of if I was a betting man, and again, thankfully that there's no such thing as betting on college football recruits, um, I would say running back still like an Audric Estime, where Notre Dame stands in that recruitment. If they offer, I think they're going to get him. Donovan, again, not ruling that one out. That one's still very much possible. And just the feeling and talking to sources late last week is better than the week before talking to similar sources. So you're more optimistic there, but still it's Donovan Edwards. You just don't know until he gives you a final word other way or one way or the other. Devin Upau is definitely a guy I feel will join Notre Dame's class. You have Estime, you have Upau, and I'm gonna say USC for Sierra Wright. I don't have a future cast pick in for Wrights. Neither I don't have one for Donovan either, but because like you said, it seems like Notre Dame's running second for both Edwards and Sierra, right? But it also wouldn't shock me to see them get one of them. Maybe these are just tough recruitments to read right now, guys. But like I said, the thing with Sierra is that he's assigning January 2nd, so that one's not super pressing right now as Notre Dame's finishing the race to the early signing period. So yeah, I'm gonna say they get to that 25 with Upau and Estime. And let me add real quick, I should have earlier when we were talking about the scholarship numbers, Patrick. What you see is not always the truth. Like a kid is committed, but you're not 100% sure with maybe a couple of them. Like maybe he is a blue shirt, or they're gonna gray shirt that kid, or so that they can make the kid count towards next year's class. So that's always a possibility. Because I was thinking like, man, they're taking a lot bigger class than we were expecting. This maybe 18 or 19, 20, 21 being the absolute max, and here they're at maybe 25 to 26. So these are just kind of some things that are going on in the back of my mind. Not saying that anyone in particular is going to gray shirt or blue shirt. If you don't know what those things are, Google's your friend. So again, I don't want to say that like anyone, and I know that anyone in particular is doing this, but just something to be aware of.
Yeah, there's just always ways around the numbers, whether it's early enrollees, back counting, and it the thing that I've always been told, and you come back to, is just numbers have a way of working
Yeah,
themselves out.
they always
It
do.
doesn't always look pretty, but that's just the truth.
Right.
And yeah, there's instances every year of people making them work in a not good way, or at least not upfront way. But that's neither here nor there in this. So okay, we've just told you guys about the guys that are potentially finishing this class. Let's go back to some of those guys who've been in the class for so long that you forget about them, and still kind of, yeah, easy to lose sight of, like, oh yeah, this guy who's been committed for a year or is enrolling early and has shut it down from other schools, is and that you've just considered done already, is still an impact player and potential game changer. So in that sense, Mike, who is not being talked about enough, or at least is just forgotten, or whatever label you want to put on it, as it's like, oh yeah, that guy's one of the best players in the class.
Yeah, Gabriel Rubio, defensive tackle, 6'5", 280 pounds. Uh, Rivals ranks him as the number 106 player in the country, number 9 defensive tackle. Um, a lot of a lot of these recruits will commit to a school, and then you hear about it, that they're being recruited by other schools. Like they'll receive more offers, or kind of just leak out there that so and so is considering other schools, and then the stock continues to rise with some of those kids because like wow, he's committed, and these schools want him, and it gets out there. Well, Rubio, schools have been contacting him for like ever since he committed to Notre Dame. It never slowed down. LSU is a school I know, that I'll name drop. That I mean, went out in St. Louis to see Rubio last year, and his pops told me that like LSU's still hitting him up all the time, and I'm not, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bunch of other schools that were still hitting him up all throughout this year as well. So I'm sure it's cooled down a considerable amount, since Rubio is not able to take any visits, and not that he would, if things opened up, but yeah, they just don't have any chance to flip Rubio. Um, yeah, I just think that people are forgetting about him. He committed June 15th, 2019. So he's been on the class so long. Everyone was excited about him when he committed, and then he had a huge junior season, and then into the spring, and then he only played I think 4 games this fall. He had an injury, and then there was a bunch of COVID cancellations on his team, and then they got bounced in the playoffs in the first game. So I feel like people are just kind of forgetting about Gabriel Rubio, but this dude is just a workaholic. One of my favorite kids I've covered. Super team first kid. Wants no attention. Just wants to work. His dad played in the NFL and is a firefighter now. I've got to meet his family. Patrick, I know you've gotten to speak to his dad as well, doing a profile on him back in the off season. So he's just one of these kids you just want to root for so much, and he's not a Rudy story. He's a stud. I mean, he had some big time offers before he picked Notre Dame over the summer. So Gabriel Rubio, definitely the guy Notre Dame fans need to remember, get excited about. He's enrolling early. And then another one I feel like people are forgetting about a little bit is Kane Barong, the tight end from Hartwell, Georgia. That's northeast, in the Peach State. And I say kind of forgot about him because he's been in the news because he's been taking drops. When the initial Rivals 250 came out for the 2021 class, Kane was right around number 180 in the country. Well, now he's dropped down not only outside the 250, he's dropped to 3-star status, and then he just kind of keeps sliding in the tight end recruiting rankings. And look, I respect the Rivals analyst job. It's super difficult and impossible to rank all these kids, but this one I just haven't understood. I've seen Kane probably a half dozen times in the past year and a half, and he looks great. I mean, he blocks so well on tape, and then when you see him, he catches the ball so well, and it looks like a receiver running out there. I don't really get it. So if you're a Notre Dame fan who you're just kind of starting to follow recruiting because it's getting close to the National Signing Day, and you look at Kane Brong on the commit list, and you're like, 3-star tight end. Come on, we're tight end you. This kid had offers from you name it, he had it. He committed to Notre Dame. Chip Long leaves, and then he started picking up a bunch more offers. USC, Oregon, some others. I mean, he committed to Notre Dame over Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Penn State. You name it, he had it. So you know, he hasn't put up huge numbers in high school because he plays for a strong run first team and not quite the strongest quarterback play. Um, but the dude, like when you watch his tape and you see him in person, he's impressive and he's bigger than you would think too. Like, that's always something I forget each time I see him. Like, wow, he's like bigger and longer than I remember last time I saw him. So I'm really high on Camberong. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I love that kid and I love his family and I've seen him so many times. But I think he's gonna be very good for Notre Dame. He's also enrolling early, Patrick.
I will add to what you mentioned with just simply this. If you had forgotten about Gabriel Rubio, just go correct that. Like, you shouldn't have forgotten about him. I think he'll be one of the very best players in the class
Yeah.
for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned, Mike. Yeah, he's been committed since June of 2019. Now it's 18 months ago. I mean, just think of it. I wish we could go back to June of 2019. But anyway, it's been a while. He should still be top of mind on signing day when everyone gets a little attention there, from guys who committed way back then to someone who might send in a letter of intent, commit and sign on next Wednesday. Yeah, I think that will rightly bring Rubio's place in this class as a real potential difference maker back into focus.
Sure.
So that's going to do it. Again, we encourage you to subscribe to blueandgold.com. Follow Mike on Twitter for all the latest happenings in Notre Dame's recruiting news as signing day gets closer. Of course, we just told you what to expect, what might unfold. Follow along so you don't miss what actually happens. We will talk to you guys again in a couple of weeks. Mike and Mason Plummer will have a signing day live show. Be sure to catch that either live on YouTube or back on the podcast channel afterwards if you're listening on podcasts. Until then, take care.